السلام عليكم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah ta'ala, we are going to pick up where we left off in speaking about al-ma'fuwat, the exceptions to najasa or filth, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Now, I did send out a list that I had put together that had all of the mustatnayat, the exceptions, and I translated it. So if you have any questions, inshallah ta'ala, please do present them there in a telegram. We can go over them. And inshallah ta'ala, after Ramadan, we're going to begin our deep dive into masail that we've already covered. And what I mean by a deep dive is, and you'll see some of that today, but it means we're going to go all the way to all of the discussions that were had by our ashab in the madhab, and we'll explore what the mu'tamad is and how we arrive to the mu'tamad, inshallah ta'ala. And I won't be following any order, but it will be on topics that we've already covered, inshallah ta'ala. So in our last class, we got all the way to this segment right here where he speaks about al-mani, semen. And he says, وَأَمَّا الْمَنِيُّ فَطَاهِرٌ خِلَافًا لِمَالِكٍ. يعني in the madhab of Imam Malik, mani, semen is considered najis. Tamam? But for us, it is considered طاهر. وَكَذَا بَلْغَمُ غَيْرُ مِعْدَةٍ مِنْ رَأْسٍ أَوْ صَدْرٍ. And we went over that whole paragraph. I'm not going to go over it again, but so is, he says, is balgham, which is mucus. Tamam? Then he says, وَرُطُوبَةُ فَرْجٍ. رُطُوبَةُ فَرْجٍ, these are excretions that happen, mainly here he's referring to women. Tamam? And I told you in our last class, or towards the end, we will go over this in a little bit more depth and detail, inshallah ta'ala, which we will. But let's read his paragraph first. He says, وَرُطُوبَةُ فَرْجٍ, meaning that it's طاهر, أي قبول, meaning the front private area, على الأصح, تمام, meaning in the most accurate of opinions, وهي ماء أبيض متردد بين المذي والعرق. And it is, these are fluids that are somewhere in between madhi, which is the pre-semen liquids and fluids, and sweat, meaning their texture and the resemblance of it is somewhere in between. He says, لِأَنَّهُ يَخْرُجُ مِنْ بَاطِنِ الْفَرْجِ الَّذِي لَا يَجِبُ غَسْلُهُ. What is the farj الذي يجب غسله? We spoke about that before. We said when a woman squats down over a hole in the ground to relieve herself, certain parts of her private area are exposed. That area is what we refer to in fiqh as ما يجب غسله, what needs to be washed. And then we said there's a difference between a woman that was never married before versus a woman who was married before. What is exposed of that skin varies. Tamam? He says, بخلاف ما يخرج مما يجب غسله فإنه طاهر قطعا. So, fluids that are released from the area that she washes in her shower, those releases of fluid are considered طاهر, not najis. وما يخرج من وراء باطن الفرج فإنه نجس قطعا. باطن الفرج is referring to ما يصل إليه ذكر المجامع أو ذكر الجماع أو ذكر النكاح. There's a tunnel. That tunnel is where intercourse happens. If anything is released from her from beyond that tunnel, then it is considered najis without any difference of opinion. قال ككل خارج من الباطن, like everything that comes out from deep within the body, with the exceptions that he's going to mention in a minute. وكالماء الخارج مع الولد أو قبله. Tamam, like the water that is released right before pregnancy, meaning she broke her water. That's the water that is with the child in the sac. That water is najis. أو أي شيء خرج من الباطن. تمام. ولا فرق بين انفصالها وعدمه على المعتمد. Meaning that your stool is filthy whether it's in your body or outside of your body. It's najis. It's just that when it's inside, it's ma'fu anhu. It's excused. Once it starts to get released or it's being released, then you need to clean from it. فلو انفصلت ففي الكفاية عن الإمام. الكفاية by ابن الرفعة عن الإمام meaning إمام الحرمين أنها نجسة, that it's نجسة. ولا يجب غسل ذكر المجامع. I just mentioned that. That's the tube for intercourse. Anything that comes from there or that comes in contact with that does not need to be washed. And by association, tamam, the male organ after intercourse, if it has wetness on it from that area, it's ma'fu anhu. It is ma'fu anhu. A ghusl is needed anyway, but that fluid on the male organ would be considered what? Ma'fu anhu, because it's not from the batin, it's not from beyond that tunnel. Tamam. He says, wal bayd, eggs. All eggs don't need to be washed. They're considered tahir, even though they come from deep within the body, within the batin. Wal waladu, a baby does not need to be washed. I mean, you want to give a baby a shower, obviously, but we're saying, is it considered najis? No, it isn't. Even though it comes from the batin, it comes from beyond that tunnel, the tunnel of intercourse. وأفتى شيخنا بالعفو عن رطوبة الباسور لمبتل بها. يعني if someone has hemorrhoids and there's an excretion of a clear fluid, not stool, but just a clear fluid, which usually goes back to the irritation of the skin and so on. That's ma'fu anhu, and it's not considered something that would break what? Wudu or najasa. Of course, if the person touches it, then of course that'll break his wudu, but not because of the excretion of the fluid itself. Tamam. This now brings us to a discussion, and that is أنواع الخارج من السبيلين. And I will share this section, inshallah ta'ala, with everyone, but we want to go over a few things. Now, first, أنواع الخارج من السبيلين, or the three for women, we're talking about the different things that are released. Because in the beginning we said anything that's released from the sabilain breaks the wudu. But then we're differing now on what's najis and what's not. And then we also said many does not break wudu. So obviously our statement in the beginning was a generalized statement, and then there's details. Tamam? So we need to specify what are these things and what breaks the wudu and what does not break the wudu. So first and foremost, we have urine. Urine breaks what? Breaks the wudu. لا خلاف في ذلك. Tamam? I'm not going to get into the khuntha. You'll be able to read the khuntha, inshallah ta'ala. Wadi, we spoke about an excretion of a fluid that happens when you carry something, when there's certain, you bend your body in a certain way, old age, and we said that's najis and that breaks the wudu and does not need ghusl. Then we spoke about madhi, and madhi is pre-semen fluids. That's najis, needs to be washed off, it breaks the wudu, you do not need a ghusl. Then comes that which happens with our sisters. Now, as you can see, we mentioned things coming from the area that they need to wash in the shower, things coming from beyond the intercourse area, tamam, and then of course you have the intercourse area. So you're looking at three different types of releases that they will have. We're not speaking about urine, we're not speaking about feces, we're not speaking about hayd, menses, we're not speaking about postpartum bleeding, we're not speaking about istihada, we're talking about there are these releases of these different fluids and sometimes have chunks of skin in it as well. That would impact their wudu and also would bring najasa. So mainly the ulama will break it down to those three sections. The first section, that which comes from the area that she needs to wash when she's doing istinja and she's having a ghusl, tamam. And we defined it by how she squats over a certain type of bathroom, tamam. That which is released from there is considered tahir and therefore does not break her wudu. It does not break her wudu, which is very important because most women have continual releases. Tamam? The second kind, what comes from deep within side of them, meaning past the area of intercourse, and that is najis, and what comes out does break the wudu. The third one, what comes from the area of intercourse, and that is tahir. So if she knows that what came out was from there, then we're going to say that does not break her wudu. Now, of course, if she had intercourse, then we might say it does not break her wudu, but it definitely breaks her what? Or she needs what? She needs a ghusl if it was actually from intercourse. Tamam. Of course, if you actually run the scenario mentally, it's almost a complete imagination, because if there was intercourse, then there was skin-to-skin contact, then already they need to make wudu. But if you could eliminate skin contact magically, everyone was wearing gloves, right? Then the only thing that would be obligated technically would be ghusl and not wudu. Although it's very strange. As a married person, I'll tell you that's a very strange scenario. But I guess it could happen. And next, another thing that that gets released as well is ma'il wilada, and ma'il wilada would include her water breaking and any clear fluids. When I say clear, I just mean not blood, that are released while going through labor. And it could even happen before labor if labor is being induced. For example, sometimes there will be release of fluids. These fluids, they are considered najis. These fluids are considered what? Najis. And they break wudu when they are released. Giving birth itself, and we're going to first look at miscarriages or no clear liquids, meaning only blood is being released while going through the process of labor. This breaks the wudu according to Ibn Hajar and Al-Khatib. And Imam al-Ramli, he argues that it does not, and which is odd since Al-Khatib al-Shirbini quotes al-Ramli's father saying that it does, and he was asked, he was confronted, well, your father said that it does. How come you're saying that it doesn't? He said, no, my father actually changed his opinion and followed Zarkashi's opinion, who in turn was following another group of Ashab al-Awjuh. And this brings up a very important point. When Ibn Hajar, al-Ramli, al-Khatib, al-Abbadi, even their teachers like Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari and Ramli the father and al-Mahalli and Abdul Haqq al-Sunbati, when these people differ, they're not differing over their own opinions. This is something a lot of people don't, it doesn't click for a lot of people. And it didn't click for a lot of people after Imam al-Nawawi died, right? They started calling people, oh, you people are Nawawi and Rafi'i, you're not Shafi'i anymore. They also didn't understand the point. These scholars are not sitting down daydreaming opinions and giving them to us. No, they're actually going through opinions that have already been stated in the madhab, and they're saying A is stronger than B. That's actually what's happening. Tamam? That's why Ibn Hajar differs with Ramli. It's not because, oh, I think it's this and I think it's that. No, it always goes back to Az-Zarkashi's opinion here is opposing to Ibn Salah's opinion. And Ibn Salah and Zarkashi's opinions are actually connected to Ashab al-Awjuh themselves differing. Mumtaz. The reason why we have Ibn Salah, maybe's opinion that still lived after Nawawi, and Zarkashi's opinion is because possibly Rafi' al-Nawawi did not touch that mas'ala, and they did not expand on it. Therefore, we don't have a tarjih from them. We don't have a tarjih from them. So what's happening is that the Nuzzar usually, so people like Al-Adhra'i ibn al-Rif'a, Al-Isnawi, Al-Huzbani, Al-Bulqini, Al-Zarkashi, Al-Birmawi, these scholars, Subki, they are touching on these issues and they are analyzing it and giving an opinion. Tamam. And the ulama will, يعني after that, so Jalaluddin al-Mahalli, Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, Ramli the father, al-Fumi, Shadili, a whole long list of scholars that are referred to as the ones that came after the Nuzzar. And usually they just connect them to Minhaj and say the people that explain Minhaj. And I think that's unfair because their work was a lot greater. I mean, Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari had Asna al-Matalib. Yani that's technically a lot, or has a lot more, I don't want to say stronger, but a lot more than Minhaj. But it's these scholars that come and settle what the Nuzzar argued against the Shaykhin in their peer review or added to their discussions. They finalize it. But they too can't really address everything, so their students, Ibn Hajar, Al-Ramli, Al-Khatib, Al-Abbadi, Ba-Makhrama, and so on, what they're doing is that they are finalizing the works of their teachers. And that's really what Ibn Hajar al-Ramli are doing. And Ibn Hajar al-Ramli are looking eagerly to answer everything that they possibly can and finalize and quote and examine everything. While Khatib is more focused on, let me break it down for you easily. And that's the only difference really between Al-Khatib and Ibn Hajar and Al-Ramli. But we're focused with Ibn Hajar al-Ramli not only because the Hijazis and Yemenis liked Ibn Hajar, or because I like Ibn Hajar, and then the Egyptians liked al-Ramli, but I grew up in Egypt, how come I'm not al-Ramli? It's more of because their actual technical work. They are addressing the bulk majority of issues. Tamam? And they're discussing the other opinions as well. A full discussion. Not just telling you, here's what it is, take it or leave it. No, they're actually examining and digging deep into the proofs and the evidences. And, we recently just finished the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. I recommend everyone reads through Fath al Mu'een by Ibn Hajar. It's like the method that he's approaching in fiqh is also in his other works. He can't escape it because he's so dedicated to pulling out the madhab. Even he has a beautiful book called Tanbih al-Akhyar, and it's a response to things that Imam, I'm trying to see if I can reach it, but I don't know where I put it. And it's basically him commenting on a Suyuti, where Suyuti says, he's in his two commentaries on Al-Azkar by Imam Nawawi, he says the Shafi'i say this and this and this and this and this and this, and Ibn Hajar is saying, no, they don't. Suyuti, what are you doing? Why? How does he have this ability? Is that's what he has spent his life doing, exactly like Ramli. They both spent most of their lives researching the madhab, digging deep into what the ashab said and where they said it and what was meant by what they said. And that is shown in their works. And that's why the ulama, they feel comfortable when I'm reading through Ibn Hajar. Even if the man changed his opinion from one book to the next, the amount of study and dedication that you see in his language and what he presents to you gives you a level of certainty. Tamam. And when you research behind him, it only solidifies that you're in good hands. So that's the significance of Ibn Hajar and al-Ramli. It's not a country thing, right? That Hijazis here and Egyptians here. It's more of what did he do in the area that he was in. رضي الله تعالى عنهم أجمعين. تمام. So Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So na'am, Ar-Ramli the son, when he was asked, but your father said it breaks wudu, he said, no, my father retracted what he said. Tamam. What if there's a miscarriage of a semi-completed child? So only the legs came out. هل هذا ينقض الوضوء? Ibn Hajar said, لا ينقض الوضوء. تمام. And the Ramli said, ينقض الوضوء, which is ajib. And many of the ulama that came after Ibn Hajar, they said, technically, while it might seem that he says it does not break, when you examine his words, he does believe that it breaks. What happened here is that the closest thing to an explicit response to a portion of a child is not explicit enough to be applied to a portion of a child. What he was being presented with sounded more like a piece of flesh. So some of the ulama, they went to that and they said, well, if only the legs come out, and that was the miscarriage, the only legs formed, for example, I'm just using that as an example, then per what they understood is that la yanqud, because if you don't have a walad, la yanqud. However, when Ibn Hajar is actually mentioning some of a walad, he doesn't mean if it's only the legs, he means if it's flesh. It's only still flesh. But you can't see a formed child, tamam. So therefore, you could argue that he, for that, says la yanqud. But the mu'tamad in his words is that it would break if we're just talking about the legs. Even though some ulama attribute to Ibn Hajar, the first one, that it does not break. Tamam. Based upon what we just read, it makes more sense for just legs coming out that Ibn Hajar would say that it breaks. Because he already said, if it's a piece of flesh, not ba'd a piece of flesh, not some of a piece of flesh, but an actual piece of flesh, that it would break. So a part of legs would also mean the same. So pay attention to that, because you might find some of the ulama point out and say that Ibn Hajar says it does not break. While in reality, it's an argument based upon do his words explicitly touch that scenario, yes or no? Tamam. Al-Khatib on this mas'ala, like if only legs were the miscarriage, he said it probably does not break, and we're probably looking at that she can pick which way to go. Very interesting outlook from Al-Khatib, but his opinion is not mu'tamad. The mu'tamad here, because we technically have agreement between Al-Ramli and Ibn Hajar, so we would say that it would break. Next, we have feces. I don't need to get into that a whole lot. That is mujma', that's in the Quran, right? Then we have blood of hemorrhoids. We spoke about this before, that blood of hemorrhoids, if it's coming from the inside, this breaks the wudu and it's najis. If it's from the outside, it does not break the wudu. And is it najis? The mu'tamad is that it would be najis. What about gas? Gas breaks the wudu. Tamam? There's no tafsil in that matter. You don't need tafsil. Tamam? However, there's one thing that a lot of people do not pay attention to, and that is our sisters pass gas from the front private area. That would break wudu as well. Tamam? So the mu'tamad, according to Ibn Rif'a, is that would break the wudu as well. Then we have rare things. Number one, really, when it comes to the rare things, would be things such as worms. Tamam. And the mu'tamad is that if worms come out, worms break wudu. Mumtaz. Next would be doing things such as suppositories and medicine entering into the body from the private areas. Putting the medicine in does not break the wudu, but if the medicine drips out, that breaks the wudu. Tamam? Next, you have catheters and things that are entered into the urethra. Tamam? Or things, maybe devices that enter into the rear as well for medical reasons. Again, just inserting these things does not break the wudu. There's no khilaf on this. It's those things coming out. Tamam? That's what breaks. Well, if someone has a catheter in the urethra, nothing has come out of them, so they don't have a urine bag connected to them or anything like that. It's just a device. Can they pray? Most of our ashab, they say, no, he cannot pray. Why can't he pray? Because if there's urine within the urethra and it is in contact with it, then technically he is in the salah and in contact with something that's in contact of najasa. Remember we spoke about the dog leash in our previous lesson? Same concept here. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Naam. as we said, feces within your body is considered najis. It's just that as long as it's inside, you're excused. If it's on the exit or it's exiting, that's when there's a problem. So, based upon the catheter discussion and putting something into the urethra, if something were to be put in, tamam, put in completely, nothing sticking out, would this then in turn break the salah? Because things going in does not break the wudu. It's things coming out that breaks. So just putting something in completely, not like the catheter, some of it is out. No, we push something completely in. Does that break the, or يعني, is that considered, I have najasa on me and therefore I cannot pray? There's three awjuh in the madhab. The asah opinion is that object is now najis. The object is now what? Najis. And you would be considered hamil lil najis or mutanajis. Tamam? You are carrying something that's najis, and therefore the prayer would be invalid. Now, one might say, well, no one puts things in for fun. This might be a medical situation. Yes, we would say you're going to go ahead and make wudu if you can and pray regardless. And you would have to make it up later on if that's the case. Tamam? If it's something that you have to do indefinitely, then you'll just make tayammum for every prayer and pray. Tamam. Why am I saying tayammum and not wudu? For several reasons. Because if this is something that you're permanently going to have in there, that means you're going to be frequently changing it. Or you're frequently wearing a catheter that is connected to the urethra. Tamam. Meaning your mobility is going to be limited. Yes, if you could make wudu, I would say make wudu, but you could also go for tayammum due to you carrying around with you urine. Tamam. And now, if you have a catheter on, or a bag connected to the catheter, you take that off. You would wash what you can. If you can make wudu, make wudu. But you could, in this state, also go for tayammum if the najasa is removed. Tamam. Covered that point. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Now, as soon as the object comes out, that's naqd al-wudu, regardless if there's any najasa on it or not. Tamam. And the reason why they say this, so like imagine a catheter was put in and it was never used and you never urinated and then it came out and there was never anything on it. There was nothing at all on it, at all whatsoever. We would still say your wudu has been broken, regardless, because a nadir has the same any rarities in being removed or coming out of the private areas still nullifies your wudu. Tamam? And then this is another mas'ala where they are treating the madhanna maqam al-ma'inna, meaning the assumption. They're giving it the ruling of what more than likely happened, like we said about sleep before. Al-insidad wal-infitah. This is a very long mas'ala. Let's try to break it down in a very simple way. Two things can happen to a person. They could have a natural feeling of their private area. It could happen, deformity of some sort, and their private area seals on its own. They could be born with it. So it could be that they were born with it, and it could be that it just happened with age and time. Okay. Now the medical professionals are going to have to make new openings. Those new openings are either going to be above the stomach or below the stomach. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be below the stomach. Tamam? If it is above the stomach, and when we say above the stomach, the Shafi'iyya put the above and below, they surround it to the navel. The navel is your centerpiece. Below the stomach means below the navel. Above the navel means above the stomach. Oh, but my stomach is here. Doesn't matter where your stomach is. That's how we, shara'an, evaluate this matter. Okay, mumtaz. If the opening is above the navel, the release of anything does not break your wudu. Does not break your wudu because it wasn't processed. It didn't go through the process. So it's like vomit that never, the food that you had never actually reached your stomach. That's not najis. Mumtaz. Below the navel, wherever it is, if it's they opened in the thigh, they opened next to where the sealed area was, they made a whole new organ, doesn't matter. Anything below the navel breaks your wudu. Done. And it's considered najis. Done. However, any new opening under the navel, you cannot use masah. So you can't use toilet paper and these types of things. You can only use water. تمام? You can only use water. And then of course, يعني مما لا شك فيه, touching that new opening does not break the wudu because it's not considered the qubul and the dubur. I'm not going to get into the khunsa right now. I'll send that to everyone bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Stones or pus or blood coming out of the private area all break the wudu في الأصح كما قال جمهور أصحابنا. تمام. We spoke about the rih. No. And the same thing with rih. Whatever comes from that new opening will break your wudu. Another point that's very important, if the new opening is not in the private area, meaning between the navel and the knee. So let's just say it was above the navel. Tamam, and it's in a man, not in a woman. Technically, it would not be wajib to cover it, so it won't be considered awra, even though it's a new release and relieving point in the body. We would not consider this awra, meaning it does not have to be covered, and as I said before, touching it would not break the wudu. Tamam? And as I said, there's no masah. كله يتعين الماء. طيب, here's a crazy one that our fuqaha discussed. If there's a new opening, and this one's going to be rough, so please prepare. This chapter is usually makes people's faces red and makes people embarrassed a lot, but you have to work through it. لا حياء في الدين. If a new one was open near where the old one was, right next to it, the physicians, they opened up a new exit point. And because the other one was sealed, a couple who are married, they decide to use it for intercourse. Now, the mere contact between the spouses and one of their private areas and the other one does not obligate ghusl, meaning if they started, but there was no semen release, there's no ghusl needed. They would make wudu for opposite sex touching, but there's no ghusl unless he ejaculates. Or she, if that's possible. Tamam? Because it's not considered a farj. And since it's not considered a farj, it does not take the rules of the farj. ممتاز. وهذا ما حكاه جمهور أصحابنا. And in regards to semen, we spoke about semen. We said no ولا ينقض الوضوء, and we said that it's طاهر, and we spoke about its description before. And then with دائم الحدث, we covered دائم الحدث several times, so I think you're well aware. It's someone with continuous leakage from any one of their private areas. If anyone has this case, it could be blood, could be urine, could be feces, could be semen, could be could be اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد, pre-semen fluids and so on. For all of them, even for the one that has a continuous release of semen, if that could be imagined, because medically that would be somewhat problematic, but we'll just say it's possible. All of these people would wash their private area, put on their padding and stuffing if they're using that, and then they're going to make wudu and pray immediately with the intention of istibaha. And there, ya ikhwan, we've covered everything that is released from the private area of a human. Now, He covered the eggs for us, and eggs don't really come out of humans in that way. So we are good to go with everything that is released from human. If you have any questions, again, always feel free to mention them or type them out into Telegram. بإذن ta'ala. You can do that during the class so you don't forget. Tamam. He says, وَكَذَا بَيْضِ غَيْرِ مَأْكُولٍ. The eggs of an animal that we do not eat, they are طاهر. So when he says وَكَذَا, that's connected to the word balgham. It's connected to the the different excretions from women that are طاهر. تمام. ويحل أكله على الأصح. تمام. We are allowed to consume the eggs of animals that we do not eat. تمام. As long as you know that health-wise it's okay, as Ibn Hajar said. وشعر مأكول وريشه إذا أبين في حياته. The hair and the feathers of an animal that we eat, that we consume, that have fallen off while it's alive. Like when I ride a horse and I come off and there's hair on me. Tamam. That's considered tahir. It's actually considered ma'fu anhu, and there's a long discussion about this. Imam al-Subki brings up in his books. I'm not going to get you too much. I'll leave that for a deep dive evening, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But normally, and he's going to mention this right now, there's a qa'idah in our school, and this qa'idah says that which is separated from a living creature has the same ruling of the mayta of that creature. Meaning, if I stumble upon a cow and I do not know how it died, it's dead. That animal is called what? Mayta. That means if I come to a cow that's alive and I'm patting it and some of its hair comes off, technically that's mayta. That's what? That's mayta. And if it's mayta, it's najis. But here's a problem. What's the problem? Aside from taking my kids to a petting zoo, I might live around these animals on a regular basis. Horses, cows, sheep, camel, etc. Meaning, especially back then before cars, if I was going down to the end of the street, I hopped on a horse. If I'm going to school, I'm hopping on a horse. Their horse was our bike, motorcycle, and car. So by taking that understanding of, well, the hair and the feathers that come off have the ruling of its mayta, then it's najis, then how do I use wool? And this for Imam al-Subki was a very big problem. Why are we even arguing for this? So for the most part, we will say that it's ma'fu anhu. Of course, ma'fu anhu sounds good in principle until you go buy a pillow that's filled with feathers. Or you have a mattress that's filled with wool. What kind of afu if the whole entire bed is like that? So what is the true gauging mechanism here? We're going to keep that for deep dive, inshallah ta'ala. Just know for now, we're going to call it ma'fu. And as you can see, he right here is treating it what? As tahir. But I just want you to know there's more to that discussion. He says, إذا أبين يعني أزيل يعني انفصل. Taken apart يعني. ولو شك في شعر أو نحوه أهو من مأكول أو من غيره. If there's animal hair and you're not certain, is this from a horse or from a lion? A horse I can eat, a lion I can't eat. What do? You're going to treat it as tahir. Why? Because normally, unless you are from the GCC and have lions or tigers as pets, people don't have, maybe unless they work in a zoo, people don't have lion hair stuck on their clothes. They'll normally have horse hair, right? Or a cat hair. And therefore, to assume that it's from that, but then you'll say, well, hold on. Al-hirra is not min ma'kulin. You'll see in the next section that it's ma'fu anhu too. And I'm using cat because we normally might not have horses today. Last time I saw a horse, we're in the month of March, right? So if I go back exactly 1 year, to March of 25. How many horses did I see? I saw 3. So, يعني, once you are in major cities and stuff like that, you years could go by without you even seeing a horse. Tamam? So I mentioned cat. Not that we can eat it. Maybe a better example for his scenario would be, is this a chicken feather or an eagle feather? Tamam? Then I'm not sure. I go back to the asl and I say huwa tahir, because people don't have eagles lying around. More than likely it belongs to a chicken or a duck. Tamam? He says, أو هل انفصل من حي أو ميت? Does this come from a living being or from a dead being? Because if it's already dead, then the whole animal is najis. Tamam? And in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they saw a mayta on the side of the road, the Prophet ﷺ said, what is this? They said, it's mayta, ya Rasulullah, meaning they understood. Look at this. They understood that it was najis because they said, it's mayta, ya Rasulullah. He said, أَهَلَا إِنْتَفَعْتُمْ بِإِهَابِهَا? Why don't you benefit from its leather? And then he says what? أَيُّمَا إِهَابٍ قَدْ دُبِغْ فَقَدْ طَهُرْ. Any skin of an animal that goes through dibagh, the tanning process, and we'll go over that in deep dive inshallah ta'ala, tanning process is not clean. But when I put animal skin, the hide, through the tanning process, the fur, the feathers, all of these things fall off. And these things are considered najis. They're not tahir. تمام؟ قال وقياسه أن العظم كذلك وبه صرح في الجواهر. وبه صرح في الجواهر. And that has its own discussion. تمام? Because when you say أن العظم كذلك, well, the عظم doesn't come from a حي. عظم. يعني you're not going to go around finding a cow hip bone that came from a cow that's still alive. تمام؟ هذا مشكل. Where did the bone come from? It had to be mayyit. So then your argument here is that وقياسه, and per the qiyas, تمام, that if the bone is from مأكول or غير مأكول, that's what you're really going to have to say. You're not talking about the life and death, because a bone will only come from an animal that's dead. تمام. Another qiyas here would be the sha'r. But again, we already explained that when he said وَهَلْ انْفَصَلَ مِنْ حَيٍّ أَوْ مَيِّتٍ, when we use the chicken, duck versus eagle. وَبَيْضُ الْمَيْتَةِ. Now, there's a chicken that got ran over by a car. So you're taking it to throw it away, and there was an egg inside, and it pops out when you picked it up. They said إِن تَصَلَّبَ فَهُوَ طَاهِرٌ, meaning if it comes out and the shell is hard, then it's tahir. If the shell is soft, then it's najis. Then it's considered what? Najis. هذا هو التفصيل. He says وَسُؤْرِ كُلِّ حَيَوَانٍ طَاهِرٍ طَاهِرٌ. The su'r is the saliva in the mouth. Not from the throat, not from the stomach. No, it's the saliva in the mouth. That's the su'r. You find the su'r being mentioned in a hadith where they'll say, and a sahabi was guiding the camel of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the camel drooled onto him. No mentioning of anything. No mentioning of anything. Like, you don't have to wash it, you don't have to do anything about it. Therefore, we understand from this hadith and numerous other ones saying the same exact thing, that the su'r is okay. As a matter of fact, by the mas'ala he's about to mention, and the mas'ala of the dog and having to wash from it, we understand that normally, if the animal is clean, then their su'r is clean. Their mouth is clean. He says, فَلَوْ تَنَجَّسَ فَمَهُ. So if their mouth gets dirty, tamam. Al-Imam al-Kurdi and Sharh al-Ubab and others, they say, fam here, mouth here, is just an example. It's not a qayd. It's not the only scenario. If part of them gets dirty, then they go somewhere, or you leave them for a little bit and come back and that area looks different, or they might have removed it. You don't see anything there anymore. This is easier to be imagined with a cat that caught a mouse. And they took a bite into it and you see the blood on their mouth. You go to work and you come back an hour later and the cat looks perfectly clean. Normally when a cat or when any of these creatures, they eat, they drink right after. They wash out their mouth. They lick up and they clean up. Tamam? Subhanallah, his creation is amazing. So once you come back again and you do not see any of that residue on the cat or whatever part of their body that you had seen filth once before, it's gone, then we assume that it's what? It's been cleaned. تمام؟ قال ثم ولغ في ماء قليل أو مائع فإن كان بعد غيبة يمكن فيها طهارته بولوغه في ماء كثير أو جار لم ينجسه ولو هرة وإلا نجسة. He's saying, meaning that it went to go drink in a lot of water. But, basically you just come back and you don't find it. Now, they went and they cleaned themselves. However they cleaned themselves, it's gone. You assume that they went and drank water and they cleansed themselves or they got into water. They did something to clean themselves. خلاص تحسبها ماذا? You'll treat it as if they are now clean. However, there's a little bit of an if here and a but and a maybe. If the animal is in a cage and has no access to water, but maybe like a tube that it puts its mouth on and drinks from, and that's it, with no possibility of getting access to a lot of water. Tamam? And you come back and you do not see the najasa. This is a problem. Because the possibility of it cleansing itself in a suitable amount of water now is off the table. The najasa is still mentally there. It's still what? It's still mentally there. لماذا? Because you know it's there. So even though you can't see its residue, you would still give it najasa hukmiyya. You would treat the area as najis until the assumption of it getting access to a bigger amount of water has actually taken place. That ihtimal, that presumption, or assumption that you have of it getting access to water is fundamental in this scenario from working. And this whole entire scenario comes from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إذا ولغ عفوا that's the كلب إنها من الطوافين عليكم والطوافات. It is from the animals that roam amongst you and they leave and they come back and they handle their affairs and come back. He was talking about cats. Tamam. So you need to now connect those dots, and that's what the Shafi'i did. And the argument here is the assumption that it went and drank water and it went to a big body of water and cleansed itself and drank and washed out its mouth and so on. Tamam. Let's check our time. 48, okay. We can read through this real quick. قال شيخنا كالسيوطي تبعا لبعض المتأخرين إنه يعفى عن يسير عرفا من شعر نجس من غير مغلظ. تمام. شعر, hair, and we would also include in that feathers from an animal that's غير مغلظ, meaning all hair aside from a كلب and a خنزير, a dog and a pig. ومن دخان نجاسة. In many countries, they set fires to human waste and trash. That smoke, especially the dark smoke that is carrying that najasa, a small amount of it, عرفا, is معفو عنه. You'll see this in the list that I sent yesterday. So I have the list right here. تمام. And you'll see القليل من دخان النجاسة والمتنجس. تمام. وقيده في الإمداد بألا يكون من المغلظ. And that list has the bulk majority of everything that they have stated. Tamam. With some of the things of Ibn Ahmad. And Ibn Ahmad, he consolidates and retracts a little bit differently, and that's why his is like in the 60s range. This is pretty much tackling the same exact things. But we'll still go over Ibn Ahmad's Manzuma, inshallah ta'ala, with Imam al-Ramli's Sharh. قال وعما على رجل ذباب وإن رؤيا. Any najasa that might be on the legs of an insect. Here he says fly, but by extension you would say insect, even if you see it, because it would be so hard to control. وما على منفذ غير آدمي مما خرج منه. When animals relieve themselves, especially with feces, basically, what happens is that their private area, tamam, it expands and then it retracts. During the retraction, there might be residue. That's ma'fu anhu, tamam. And this includes all animals, tamam. Cats, dogs, all animals. With the dog, of course, we'll have the exception just because it's mughallad, so it has nothing to do with it relieving itself. But think about animals that are clean. So your chickens, your ducks, tamam, even your cats and so on. The cat might relieve itself in its litter box or outside and then come and sit with you. You don't have to be extra sensitive. It's ma'fu anhu. وَذَرْقِ طَيْرٍ وَمَا عَلَى فَمِهِ. And a little bit of that which happens from birds. Originally, anything that comes from birds' feces or urine is considered najis, but a little bit was ma'fu anhu. وروث ما نشأه من الماء أو بين أوراق شجر النرجيل, تمام, which is basically coconut. So ما نشأه في الماء, creatures that live in the water. And I know he says nash'uhu, and the word nash means that it is made in the water or it resides in the water. It just means that animals that live in the water, period. That's literally what that expression is referring to. Their droppings are considered ma'fu anhu. However, with that being said, that's a general concept. So if I get the fish and I'm cutting it open, I'm gutting it to clean it, and there's feces, now it's been exposed, so therefore it's not ma'fu anhu. Where this comes into play, if I am cleaning out the guts, for example, of a fish and I miss a little bit, and it could be their feces, or I eat a shrimp and I forget to pull the string of its feces from its back and things like that. Tamam. Here you would say يُعْفَ عَنْ هَذِهِ الْأُمُورِ. But if you do see it, if you did not do your part and you knew of it, then of course it's no longer ma'fu, because then it leaves that realm. All of these things that are excused, think about it like this. If I'm soaking wet and I pass by the smoke of najasa, nothing is on me, I'm still okay. However, if I look and I start seeing residue and I was wet, and I put wet here because that moist will cause the smoke to stick. If I see that residue, it's no longer ma'fu. The afu here came from when I'm dry and I was passing through, and a little bit came on me because of the wind. But if I'm wet, khalas, wetness transmits, dryness does not. Tamam? He says, نعم, أو بين أوراق شجر النرجيل التي تستر البيوت عن المطر حيث يعصر صون الماء عنه. Certain insects that might get onto plants, and najasa that really can't be seen, and insects that can't be getting rid of. Now, if you can see it and it can be removed, that needs to be removed. But I don't need to go and water down the trees in the jungle from insects, or trees around my home from insects, if I don't necessarily see them, or if I see them but I don't see their feces, I don't need to go and wash down the tree. But now if I see it, I need to wash it. قال جمع وكذا ما تلقيه الفئران من الروث في حياض الأخلية إذا عم الابتلاء به. نعم. In certain open areas, in certain corners, in certain alleys, you will see little grains. They look like little black grains. That's basically droppings from rats. If the area is infested with rats and there's no way to stop them, I'm not going to say it's najis, because that's going to be very problematic. And therefore, many of the ulama, they came and said, what? If there's an infestation, something I can't control, I'm not going to go around saying, well, the whole entire area is najis, because if there's a lot of droppings from rats and mice, then whenever I see a scratch, I'm going to consider, like, basically, we're going to have to quarantine the area. Now, of course, it would be recommended that the neighborhood actually removes these types of things just because the illnesses alone, forget about najasa. But if this is something that is uncontrollable, something that cannot be stopped, then we fall into umum al-balwa. And as I said in our previous class, once you reach the issue of umum al-balwa, an unescapable reality, then automatically the af comes in, it kicks in, and it solves this problem. قال ويؤيده بحث الفزاري. يعني الإمام الفزاري, he had a بحث on this, and again, like I just said, once something becomes عمت به البلوى, there's no escaping this new reality, then automatically the afu kicks in. تمام. And I spoke the other day, I think it was last class or the class before that, on hand sanitizer. For the Shafi'iyya, it's still really being considered najis. And therefore, the argument, and some people came and argued because of COVID that عمت به البلوى. Again, hand sanitizer comes in bottles this big. You're supposed to put a little bit on your hand and rub your hands. عمت به البلوى, to what extent? Its presence and it's spreading, the hand sanitizer? Sure. Me entering the prayer with it? No, that's what Australians call far out. No, you can rinse your hands before you pray. تمام. لم يعم به البلوى. People have been using hand sanitizer for the past 50 years. It was never a balwa, and COVID didn't make it a balwa either. والله المستعان. قال وشرط ذلك كله إذا كان في الماء أن لا يغير انتهى. Meaning the condition in order to allow things to be معفو عنه is that if I add water to it, it does not impact it. And when we say impact it, it doesn't move it from point A to point B. This is what they mean by the water not impacting it. تمام? And it not changing the water, it means the substance moving. Because if the substance moves, when I say substance, I don't mean something hard. I mean substance that is fluid, water touching it, and therefore you see it smurging out in the water, expanding in the water. Tamam. If it is a solid item, like droppings from a rat, that won't change the water. But we're not doing it because it's changing the water, not changing the water. We're doing it due to another fact altogether, which is what? Which is its excessive presence makes it hard for us to control. And that's where that is coming from. Tamam. فاضل 3 دقائق. There are 3 minutes left. And we're going to read this sentence right here. والزباد طاهر ويعفى عن قليل شعره كالثلاث, like 3. كذا أطلقوه. That is how they generalized it, that it's معفو عنه. ولم يبينوا أن المراد القليل في المأخوذ للاستعمال أو في الإناء المأخوذ منه. What do you mean, or what did they mean by its طاهر? And when they said there's af from a little bit of its hair, and they said 3, what did they mean? Where's this af exactly? Okay, pause for a moment. What is az-zibad? This is your homework if you can read Arabic. Go through the Shafi'i books and read up on the matter. Okay? Is it something that happens to the water? Is it an animal that roams the jungles of Africa? Is it milk from a creature? Is it foam that comes to the top of a water? What is az-zibad? Explore Shafi'i works. You probably want to look at mid-level text and above. You won't find it in small-level text. So you won't find it in things like Abi Shuja', مختصر الصغير, مقدمة الحضرمية. You won't find it in these places. You'll find it in Al-Iqna', كفاية الأخيار by Al-Hisni, some of the Hawashi of Ibn Qasim al-Ghazdi. Go and explore and enjoy. Tamam. And in our next class, we'll pick up from az-zabad also known as الزباد, and some people call it الزباد too, with a dhamma. What is this thing? And why can't they pinpoint what it is? What are they referring to? Do we still use it today? Explore, and inshallah ta'ala, we will speak about it in our opening discussion of this odd creature from beyond. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله تعالى لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.